I don't know if he's just looking for some headlines or what he has going on.
I thought that was a little girl. That ain't no girl? That ain't no female rapper? I thought that was a little pretty little girl. I didn't know. I didn't know it was a boy. I thought it was a little pretty little girl. That her brother got stabbed to death or something, right?
In the summer of 2022, 14-year-old Notti Osama was fatally stabbed at a Manhattan subway station. Most people assumed his older brother, Didi Osama, was finished. That grief like that ends a career before it starts. Instead, within weeks, Didi's name was everywhere. His music was reaching people who'd never heard of Harlem Drill, and a song the two brothers had recorded together before the tragedy became one of the most talked about records in the entire scene. How that happened, and what it actually cost him, is the real story here. David Deshaun Reyes was born in 2006 to Dominican parents and grew up in Harlem, a neighborhood with a long, complicated relationship with music, one that's produced some of hip-hop's biggest names and buried plenty of talent that never got the chance to flourish. Didi had an older brother, Jay Stunna, already making noise as a drill artist, but it wasn't until his younger brother Ethan started making music in 2021 that Didi really caught the bug himself. Ethan Reyes, born in January 2008, was the youngest of 6 siblings, and by the time the family settled in Harlem, he'd become known as Notti Osama. He started releasing music at 13 with a raw, chaotic energy that caught people off guard immediately. The brothers fell into a rhythm fast. Didi started dropping his own material in 2021, and the two collaborated on a record called Aftermath that same year. Nothing that blew up, but it showed the chemistry. By March 2022, Notti appeared on 2 Tap D In alongside Sugar Hill Dot, a childhood friend of Didi's, and the record started generating real buzz in New York's drill underground. In later interviews, Didi reflected on those early sessions as rough, two brothers still figuring out who they were as artists, but said the chemistry was undeniable from the start, and each new track showed them both growing. They were right in the middle of becoming something real. Then July arrived. On July 9th, 2022, 14-year-old Ethan Reyes was in Hamilton Heights, his old neighborhood, with 2 friends. At some point, the group crossed paths with a 15-year-old named Kelvin Martinez, someone Notti reportedly had prior tension with. According to reporting, Notti grabbed a broom and, with his friends, followed Martinez into a subway station at 137th Street. A confrontation escalated inside. Martinez drew a knife, and Notti was stabbed once in the abdomen. He was rushed to Mount Sinai Morningside Hospital, but the injuries were fatal. He was 14 years old. Martinez was initially charged with second-degree murder, but by October 2022, the Manhattan District Attorney's Office dropped all charges, stating that based on witness accounts and the sequence of events, prosecutors couldn't disprove a claim of self-defense beyond a reasonable doubt. Whatever the legal conclusion, the human reality was devastating. An 8th grader went to his old neighborhood on a summer afternoon and never came home. His family set up a memorial near their home in Yonkers almost immediately. Friends and relatives described him as a natural entertainer, someone who'd been performing for family since he was old enough to walk. A GoFundMe for funeral costs raised thousands within days. New York's drill community grieved openly, and Didi was left to figure out what came next. Didi didn't hide his grief. He went to social media and wrote about his brother in raw, unguarded terms, the kind of grief that isn't performing for anyone, just spilling out because there's nowhere else for it to go. In a deeply personal interview with Complex in late 2023, he talked about how certain he and Notti had both been that they were going to make it. Not hoping, certain. And that if his brother hadn't died, the world would have eventually seen both their faces. He wasn't angry when he said it, just quietly carrying the weight of knowing exactly what had been taken. Not just a brother, but the creative partnership the two of them had been building session by session. That left Didi with an impossible question. Do you keep making music when the person you built your sound with is never stepping into the booth again? What he ultimately decided, and what fans point to as the defining moment of who he is as an artist, was that walking away wasn't the answer. Continuing was, not because the grief went anywhere, but because stopping felt like letting Notti's story end in that subway station, and he wasn't willing to let that happen. He's described music as his therapy ever since, the place where he could process what was happening without it swallowing him whole. While Didi was processing the worst loss of his life, a song the brothers had recorded together weeks before the tragedy was about to explode. Dead Ops. Didi leading, Notti right beside him, was released just 3 days after Notti's death, on July 12, 2022. People heard it differently after that. A track that had always been aggressive and energetic now carried something impossible to separate from what had just happened. A document of two brothers before the world lost one of them. It went on to rack up over 55 million streams on Spotify and 39 million YouTube views, staggering numbers for a pair of teenage brothers who hadn't yet broken out of the underground. What mattered, though, is that the song actually worked as music. The chemistry between the brothers was real and undeniable even before anyone knew what had happened. The tragedy gave it weight, but the music was the foundation, which meant Didi's rise wasn't built purely on sympathy. People were genuinely connecting with what he was making. He didn't stop there either, releasing 10 more singles before the end of 2022, each one showing a young artist processing grief through his work in real time. Then came a much darker chapter. In October 2022, a New York drill group signed to Republic Records released a diss track called Notti Bop, mocking Notti months after his death, sampling a children's cartoon theme with an accompanying TikTok dance that mimicked the act of stabbing. At its peak, the sound was used in over 15,000 TikTok videos, with plenty of people doing the dance with no idea or no concern for what it actually represented. The backlash across hip-hop was immediate and fierce, criticizing the exploitation of a grieving family and the normalization of youth violence as content. For Didi and the Reyes family, it became one of the most painful extensions of an already unbearable loss, a specific kind of cruelty that's hard to put into words. Didi addressed it publicly, but refused to dignify it with extended engagement, making his position clear without feeding the controversy further. Strangely, the backlash ended up redirecting more attention toward Didi's actual music, as people who learned about the trend went looking for context and found Dead Ops, found Notti's story, and became genuine fans of the music rather than the controversy. From there, Didi's career moved fast. In December 2022, just months after losing his brother, he linked with Lil Mabu for Way I Am, his biggest performing track on Spotify at the time. Early 2023 brought collaborations that pulled him outside the drill lane entirely, and by May 2023, he released his debut mixtape, Here to Stay, through Alamo Records and Sony. 14 tracks that showed real range beyond drill, pulling in Jersey Club influences and outside collaborators. That same year, he joined Lil Durk's Sorry for Da Drought tour alongside Kodak Black and NLE Choppa, a teenager whose name the mainstream barely knew 18 months earlier, now on stages across the country with some of the biggest names in the genre. By 2024, his total streams across platforms had crossed 800 million, with monthly Spotify listeners in the hundreds of thousands, making him one of the most visible young rappers to come out of New York in years. Not because of how his brother died, but because he turned that grief into relentless output. Through all of it, Notti's memory has never functioned as a marketing angle. It runs through everything Didi makes. He's recorded direct tributes like Long Live Notti and Letter to Notti, the latter closing out Here Too. Stay is arguably the rawest thing he's ever put on record, moving from devastation to a vow to keep going for his brother and his mother. He's referenced Notti in tattoos, in live shows, in interviews where he talks about his brother with total directness rather than distance. He said Notti's voice shows up in his music constantly. Not literally, but in the attitude, the refusal to be anything less than what the two of them said they'd become together. Step back from the whole arc of this story, and what you find is something that sits uncomfortably between tragedy and resilience. Didi's talent and work ethic are real, and so is the fact that his rise is inseparable from the death of a 14-year-old who never got to hear the world respond to what they'd built together. Youth violence in New York isn't an abstract issue or a lyric. It's a kid at a subway station on a Saturday afternoon, a family setting up a GoFundMe to bury their son, a brother deciding in the middle of grief whether music still means anything without the person he made it with. What Didi has done since isn't capitalize on a tragedy. It's told the truth about what that loss actually felt like, record after record, refusing to let his brother become just a name attached to a viral trend. Two brothers from Harlem pushing each other to be better in whatever space they could find. One of them made it out of July 2022, and he's spent every day since making sure the other one lives on in the music. What do you think about how Didi has carried his brother's legacy? Drop it in the comments and stay locked in. We've got a lot more coming.